All right. I got a question for you. How many people in here like science? Show of hands. All right. If you don't have your hand up, you should probably just leave. There's the door. Here's another question. How many in here like math? Okay, leave your hands up. Everyone turn to those people and say, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? No. Listen, I like science and math. I actually became a full-time high school science and math teacher. Yeah, there's probably some science and math teachers here, right? And then I actually left a career doing that to become a full-time Christian apologist. Now, a Christian apologist is not someone who goes around saying, I'm so sorry I'm a Christian, please forgive me. No, we make other people sorry. We're Christians, don't we? No, we don't do that either. We don't do that. No, we just make the case for Christianity. We try to persuade people. We try to offer arguments and counter-arguments, but we do it in a gracious way. And so I'm now a full-time Christian apologist with a ministry called Stand to Reason. Now, since the pandemic, I've been doing this new thing online, and it's called Red Pen Logic. Anyone heard of Red Pen Logic? Okay, that's what you're going to have to do. After this, you're going to go online, and you're going to look up Red Pen Logic. We got YouTube. We hit over 100,000 subscribers. We're on TikTok. Look, I don't want you to be on TikTok, but if you're on TikTok, follow Original Mr. B. We're on Instagram. We're on all the things, okay? And we're answering the toughest challenges that show up on those social media platforms because you guys are being inundated with challenges on social media. In fact, I think actually we have a breakout, right, on how to navigate those conversations on social media. You're probably going to want to check that one out at some point. But I actually want to kind of take the ball a little bit further from what Lee Strobel talked about. He talked about there being God, a maker of the cosmos. And I want to look specifically at how does that register with you here in the pew right now, okay? So I want to talk about this question, who am I that you are mindful? Who am I that you are mindful of me? Now I want to start with this. A story. In the late summer of 1977, Voyager 1 and 2 launched from Kennedy Space Center in Florida, okay? And they soon broke free from the Earth's gravity. Their mission was to explore the outer reaches of our solar system. For 13 years, they studied the solar system's mysterious gas giants. So you got Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. And through this long journey, they captured photographs and collected data. Now, one of the most memorable photographs that Voyager 1 took was taken February 14th, 1990, okay, Valentine's Day. And it was taken from a record distance from the sun, like 6 billion kilometers. Oh yeah, I'm in the US. 4 billion miles. When are you guys going to start using the metric system along with the rest of the world? Okay, like when's that going to happen? I think I started a controversy. Now, at the request of Carl Sagan, Voyager 1 was turned around and they took a photograph, one last photograph of the Earth. And it's what you're looking at here. You see that dot on the screen? That's us. That's Earth. This was called the pale blue dot. Now, you don't have to stare at this incredible image very long before deeper philosophical, big questions start to come to mind. Questions about our meaning, questions about our purpose, questions about our value start to be challenged by that point of blue light. Now, one of the great scientists of our day was astronomer Carl Sagan, okay? And he reflected on this image of earth. And I want you to listen to what he has to say. We actually have his voice. He read it. This comes from his book. Listen as this plays.
Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves.
Now notice, your self-importance is just imagined. Your privileged position, that's a delusion, okay? That's on Sagan's view. What's really remarkable is that the psalmist David actually looked up at the exact same heavens, but came to a very different conclusion. In fact, here's what David said. He said, "When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, the Son of Man that you care for him?" And then he answers the question. He says this, "Yet you made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor." Now notice the connection here, because I can't tell you how many times I read this passage and missed something fundamental to it. What David is doing is he's connecting the mindfulness, God's mindfulness of man, with God's making of man. Yet you made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor. And I think he's talking about God creating us in his image. And so here's if you get nothing from the rest of this talk, I want you to get this. The one who made you is mindful of you. The one who made you is mindful of you. The one who created you cares for you. And that is a big deal. In fact, there's two vastly different worldviews in play here. A worldview is your view of the world, okay? It's your beliefs about the world. And in Carl Sagan's case, we have a worldview that is naturalism. This is the idea that nature is all there is. And on this view, you are a cosmic accident. That's what you are. You're a cosmic accident. You're just stardust, okay? And there's no purpose, and there's no meaning, and there's no moral values. In fact, this is exactly what Richard Dawkins says. He's kind of a famous atheist, wrote a book called The God Delusion. He says this. He says, in a universe of electrons and selfish genes, blind physical forces and genetic replications, that's all there is. Some people are going to get hurt. Other people are going to get lucky. And you won't find any rhyme or reason in it, nor any justice. Now, he goes on to say this. The universe that we observe, so he's looking out at the universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. Do you get it? It's like no designer, then of course you're going to have no design. No purposer, then you're going to have no purpose. No moral lawgiver, then you're going to have no moral law, no good or evil. That's naturalism. That's the worldview. Now, I want you to contrast that with the theistic worldview. The theistic worldview is different. This says that the one who made you actually gives you objective and ultimate meaning and purpose and value. How so? Well, they're grounded in the maker. So if there's no maker, if there's no creator, you don't have those things. But when you do, all of a sudden, life becomes meaningful. And now you have purpose and you have infinite value. Now, how did we get from David writing the Psalms, looking at the heavens, to Carl Sagan, who's looking at the same heavens? and coming to the conclusion that we are a cosmic accident. How did that happen? I kind of want to walk through some of this with you. What I want to do is I want to look at the heavens. I want to, just like David, consider the heavens. All right, let's go back a few hundred years, okay? Like, back to the ancient Greeks, 350 BC, it was believed by most people that the earth sat motionless at the center of the heavens, okay? And that the sun and the moon and the planets, well, they orbit the earth. And that was like scientific consensus for 1,800 years. You guys know what that's called? Not heliocentric, but yeah, geocentric. That was a geocentric system. Now, here's the thing. When they had this model, they didn't think that the earth was special because it was at the center, okay? Actually, on Aristotle's view, that's where the junk collected, okay? And out there, where the sun was and the planets were, that was like the perfect heavenly spheres. But here's what happened. We ended up moving from this view to a different view. And this is the view from Copernicus, 1543. You have astronomer Nicholas Copernicus, and he changes everything with this idea that actually the sun is the center of the solar system. And this became like the cornerstone of astronomy. Now listen, this was just a scientific model. It was just a theory about how the planets move. But some people took this idea and they started thinking, oh, well, Earth isn't the center anymore. It's just one of the planets orbiting. Maybe that means that we're not special. We're not in a privileged position. And it came, for some, they started thinking, man, we're just this mediocre planet. In fact, they called it the principle of mediocrity. We're not special, we're just mediocre. In fact, there's an atheist named P.Z. Meyer, and he says this. He says, what idea should people grasp to better understand their place in the universe? You want to understand your place in the universe, student? Here's what he says. He says, I'm going to recommend the mediocrity principle, and here's what it says. It says the mediocrity principle simply states, you aren't special. The universe does not revolve around you. The planet isn't privileged in any way. Everything that you as a human being consider cosmically important is an accident. Now let's close in prayer. Right? No, let's not, okay? Let's not. That's the idea. You're just an accident. Now, this idea was actually reinforced by some with a discovery in California at the Mount Wilson Observatory by another famous astronomer named Edwin Hubble. Now, Edwin Hubble is looking through his 100-inch telescope at the cosmos, and what he sees is these fuzzy patches of the night sky. And they thought it was just like dust clouds in our galaxy. In fact, in the early part of the 20th century, they thought that our galaxy was like the edge of the universe, essentially. But then Edwin Hubble made this discovery. Those patches, like, let's look at those fuzzy patches there. When you zoom in at those fuzzy patches there, what are they? Well, keep going, keep going, keep going. And what do we find? Those aren't just like in our galaxy. Those are other galaxies. Those are galaxies that are bigger than our galaxy, which is called the Milky Way galaxy, because it tastes like chocolate, right? You know that Canada does not have the Milky Way chocolate bar? What's up with that? I know, boo. I got to like smuggle them in to our country, okay? Now, let's jump forward one more step in our little history lesson here. If you move forward to like the late 90s, you have a telescope that orbits the Earth. It's actually named after Edwin Hubble. It's called the Hubble telescope. And the Hubble telescope took this image. It was a patch of night sky that would be like a sand grain held at arm's length, and they zeroed in on this patch of the night sky for 10 consecutive days. And the image they got back is what you're looking at. What you're looking at is over 3,000 galaxies. 3,000 galaxies. Is anyone here starting to feel really small? Right? Really small. In fact, there's just one. There's just one kind of spiral galaxy. This was like the ultimate extension of this principle of mediocrity. Not only is our planet Earth just like one planet of many planets that orbit stars in the universe, but our galaxy is just one of many galaxies in the universe. Man, you might start to feel small, right? Now, let's just go one more step here and consider this. There are something like 200 billion galaxies, we think, in the universe, okay? In the universe. Now, if you just were to go from one star, like our sun is a star, to another star, the average distance is 30 trillion miles. 30 trillion to go from one star to another star. If we got in our best technology, like a space shuttle, which can go 17,000 miles per hour, 5 miles a second in space. If we got in a space shuttle and wanted to go from our star to another star, it would take you 200,000 years. And that's 2 stars. And our galaxy has 100 billion stars, and there's over 100 billion galaxies. Now I'm feeling pretty small. Now it's no wonder a guy like Bill Nye. You guys familiar with Bill Nye, the science guy, right? Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I mean, I grew up on Bill Nye. Bill Nye, the science guy, is a naturalist. His worldview is that there is no God. And ideas have consequences. And here's what he said at kind of an atheist convention a couple years ago about all this. Consider the heavens and how small we are. Here's what he says.
So I remember thinking, I am just another speck of sand. And the Earth, really, in the cosmic scheme of things, is another speck. And the sun, an unremarkable star, nothing special about the sun. The sun is another speck. And the galaxy is a speck. I'm a speck, on a speck, orbiting a speck, among other specks, among still other specks, in the middle of specklessness. I am insignificant.
I'll cut him off there. He gets a little bit wild and crazy. He says, I'm nothing. I'm insignificant. And he goes on from there, okay? You understand, though, where he's coming from. He's a cosmic accident. Look how big the universe is. It's so vast, right? And so you have, man, look at our galaxy. It's just a speck amongst these galaxies. Our solar system, it's just a speck amongst even our galaxy. And then, of course, our planet is just kind of a speck within our solar system. We're just a speck. That's what he's getting at. You look at this. And he says, we're so small, therefore we are insignificant. We're so small, therefore we're insignificant. But is that the right conclusion? Is that the right conclusion? Well, I want you guys to consider here another piece of the puzzle. Yes, it is true that the universe is huge. And I actually think that's because the heavens declare the glory of God. And so we would expect them to be large, okay? But there's another piece to this. It's not just that the universe is vast, but there's also this other piece called the fine-tuning of the universe. Now, I want to go here, and I know Lee just touched on this, but because if there is a maker, then that has ramifications. How many of you have been to New York? Anyone been to New York? If you've been to New York, you've been on the subway there. The subway system's kind of confusing. I mean, my GPS, my internal GPS is broken. Like when I go at the front doors of this church, I'm lost, okay? When I pull into my driveway, sometimes I go the wrong way, all right? So when you get on one of the subway trains, they all go in different directions, but they all have one thing in common. They are all taking you somewhere. And it's the same with ideas. Ideas take you somewhere. And if there is a maker, then what you are is made in the image of God. And who you are is determined by God. You now have meaning and purpose. And how you behave is how God intends you to behave. If there is no maker, then what are you? Well, you're just stardust and you're insignificant. Who are you? Well, you're whatever you decide to be, because you have to create your own meaning. And that's exhausting, by the way. And that is why, especially young people, are really struggling with identity right now, because you're forced to create it yourself. And it is an impossible task. It's impossible. You weren't created to make your own meaning. God gives you your meaning. And then, of course, how should you live? Well, you live however you want if you're just stardust. So let's talk about this maker idea for a minute here, okay? I think one of the best, like Lee said, that one of the best evidences for a maker is the fine-tuning of the universe. And as Lee said, there's these things that are balanced on a razor's edge. So think of like a tightrope stretched across two skyscrapers, right? And you're walking this tightrope. Literally, on either side of the tightrope, the conditions do not support life, right? Like if you take one step to the left or one step to the right, what happens? Well, you plummet to the ground, right? Literally, those are not life-permitting areas. Well, there's these things in the universe. Lee described these dials. Imagine all of physics as like these dials. And they have to be set, and some of them have to be set like just right. And if you mess with the dials, then you mess with the universe. You end up creating a different universe when you change those conditions. And so you might, where the dial is set, that like allows for life. It's life permitting. But if you move the dial, even the slightest amount, you go from life permitting to life prohibiting. Okay? So don't mess with the dials. Now, how many of you have tuned a radio? All the old people in the room at the back, right? They're the ones who have tuned the radio, right? Some of you know what I'm talking about. It used to be like you're trying to find your favorite radio station, and so you're like, it's like, and then, oh, there's your, whatever you listen to, NSYNC or whatever, and, Taylor Swift, and then you go too far, and you lose it. You're tuning to a specific radio in the same way. It's like we're tuned in for life. In fact, here's what some of the physicists and astronomers are saying about this fine-tuning. Here's Freeman Dyson. Now, he did not invent the vacuum cleaner, and I don't know why his pants are that high, okay? But here's what he said. He said, the more I examine the universe and study the details of its architecture, the more evidence I find that the universe, in some sense, must have known we were coming. The universe must have known we were coming. Or here's another astronomer, Fred Hoyle. He says, a common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics as well as chemistry and biology, and there are no blind forces we're speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seems to be so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. Here's one more quote. One more. Oh, sorry. There it is. Here's one more. As we survey all the evidence, the thought insistently arises that some supernatural agency, or rather, and he puts the capital A, agency, must be involved. Is it possible that suddenly, without intending to, we have stumbled upon scientific proof of the existence of a supreme being? The answer is what? Yes. Was it God who stepped in and so providentially crafted the cosmos for our benefit? The answer is? Yeah, it is. Now, what are they talking about? What are they talking about? I want to give you a couple of these. But just one more thing before we do. So my daughter, she's 12, my oldest, and she loves baking. We got her a baking kind of cookbook for kids, for her birthday. She loves it. In fact, they sent me a picture last night about this, a picture of this blueberry cobbler that my daughter made. First time ever making this thing. And actually, they were praying last night. My wife called me and she said, they talk to God and in their prayers, and they let God know what was their favorite part of the day and their worst part of the day. And my daughter said the worst part of the day was eating the blueberry cobbler. Okay, so she didn't actually like it. But there's a recipe she would follow, a recipe she followed. And she sometimes will intentionally or unintentionally change the recipe. Sometimes she makes a mistake with the measurements or whatever. And so you could change the recipe. You could add more flour. You could, get rid of the eggs. You could crank it up to, instead of 350, go to 800. But what happens when you do that? You change the cake, right? You change the cake. Well, here's what theoretical physicists do. A theoretical physicist can look at the recipe of the universe, the different constants and quantities, change them in their equations, like with their pencil and their paper, and see what happens to the universe. Well, let's look at a couple of these things. It turns out that underlying all the complexity of material reality is just a few particles, okay? Now, they used to think atoms were like the smallest thing. Atoms are the smallest thing. But now we know that you can actually break atoms apart into what's called subatomic particles, like electrons, protons, neutrons. You guys are probably familiar with some of these things. In fact, trigger warning. Periodic table. Oh, no. Don't worry, I'll get that off the screen in a second here. But the electron, the proton, and the neutron, they can make all these elements. So there's the helium. 2 protons, 2 neutrons, 2 electrons, you got a helium atom. Pretty cool, right? Now, what's really neat is that we've actually broken apart the neutron and the proton into smaller things. Do you guys know that? Like the proton and neutron are actually made up of particles called quarks, and they have really lame names like the up quark and the down quark. But 2 down and an up make a neutron, and 2 up and a down make a proton. And the electron, man, we're smashing that thing and it won't seem to break, okay? Now, here's the thing. You guys have mass, and these particles have mass. And these particles have really, really, really small masses. Like how small? Like all those numbers, okay? That's small. What would happen if, like the cake recipe, we start changing things? Like, what if we just took the down quark and increased it by a factor of 3? What happens to the universe? Here's what happens to the universe. You know chemistry? It's almost completely gone. Some of you guys are thinking, that's great. I don't like chemistry. The problem is you're made of chemistry, okay? So when it goes, you go. In fact, on this universe, all you have is hydrogen. That's it. Just hydrogen in the universe. No planets, stars, galaxies, none of it. What happens when we change the up quark mass? By a factor of 6. Well, when we do that, you remember chemistry again? It's totally gone. And you're literally left with nothing but neutrons floating around the universe. Similarly, with the electron, you increase that by a factor of 2.5. Just a little bit. What happens to the universe? You're back to a neutron-only universe. That is a cold, dark, lifeless universe. Is this starting to change the game a little bit? It's starting to sound like, man, maybe it was intended to be this way. Maybe there's intentional design. Now, Lee also mentioned gravity. Every 2 objects in the universe are gravitationally attracted to each other. In fact, turn to the person beside you and say, you're attracted to me. Listen, I actually use this as a pickup line on my wife. You guys don't want to hear that though, right? Or do you? So I was in the science library. That really got people going. So I was in the science library at York University, and I was studying physics. My wife was studying chemistry, and there was chemistry. And I walked up to her and I said, did you know you're attracted to me? And she said, excuse me? Now, I had hair back then, different thing going on. And she said, excuse me? And I said, well, gravitationally, it's a physical attraction. Every two objects in the universe are gravitationally attracted to each other. Now, I'm close to the Earth is big, it's keeping me on the ground. I'm attracted to the Andromeda galaxy 2.5 million light years away, okay? But we're so far apart that I'm not leaving the Earth. But the gravitational constant is finely tuned to at least 1 part in 10 to the 40th power. Now, what does that mean? Well, the odds of being struck by lightning are 1 in a million. The odds of winning the lottery in Canada are 1 in 100 million. The odds of being struck by lightning, surviving, and being struck by lightning again are 1 in a trillion. But the odds of getting a gravitational constant that will permit life are all the zeros, okay? Like, this is a big deal. Now, Lee, he stole my thunder because he talked about dimes and the continent, but he didn't actually copy and paste dimes on a screen like this, okay? Imagine we take the entire continent of North America and cover it in dimes. Say, that's a lot of dimes. It is. I literally copied and pasted. That's an afternoon I'll never get back. And then you stack those dimes all the way to the moon. Say, that's a lot of dimes. That is a lot of dimes, so I gave up at that point right there. I gave up. Imagine the whole thing, though. Okay, imagine the whole thing. And then you do that on 1 billion more continents the size of North America. And then I blindfold my friend Eric, and I put a gun to his head, and I take 1 dime. Yeah. 1 dime, red, throw it in to the sea of dimes on 1 billion continents the size of North America. Say, pick the red one or you're dead. It's the life-permitting dime. If he did, you know what everyone in the room would say? You peaked. We wouldn't say, wow, you're lucky. Now, while it's true that it's the same chances of getting any dime, you're vastly more probable in picking a non-life-permitting dime than the single red life-permitting dime. In fact, when you say chance, you remind me of this clip from Dumb and Dumber. You see, Lloyd Christmas, he falls in love with Mary, and she leaves, and he chases after her, travels across the country, finally connects with her, asks her, what are the chances of a guy like me and a girl like you getting together? And here's what she says.
What are my chances?
Not good.
You mean not good like 1 out of 100?
I'd say more like 1 out of 1,000,000.
So you're telling me there's a chance? Yeah!
All right. No, Lloyd, she's saying there's no chance. That's what she's saying, right? That's what she's saying. Look, let me close off with this. Robert Jastrow, famous astronomer, he said, for the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak. And as he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. Because what have theologians been saying for centuries? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? But not just the heavens and the earth. God has made you too. You are fearfully and wonderfully made by God. This has huge implications. If there's a maker, then you have meaning. You are valuable. You have a purpose. Let's jump back to Carl Sagan as we close here. Here's what Carl Sagan ended that quote at the beginning with. He said, in our obscurity and all this vastness, there's no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. He makes a profound connection between the creator and a savior. But on naturalism, if there's no creator, there is no savior. There is no one coming to save you. But here's what the Apostle John says, because he makes a similar connection. The Apostle John, he says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Verse 3, all things were made through him. Everything we just looked at, the heavens, were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. And then you jump down to one of the best verses in the whole Bible, John 1:14. It says, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. If you want to know your true worth, who am I that you are mindful of me? It's not enough to look at the heavens, the earth, the solar system, the galaxy. No, if you want to know your true worth, look to the Son, S-O-N, your Creator, who made you, and Savior, who saves you. Look to the one who not only created you in his image, but also thought you were valuable enough to come and die for. Amen. Thank you.